Hey, this is a video walkthrough of the AListBug question from Spring 21 61B midterm number 1. This question says we have this AList max 100 class. It's a partial implementation of an array list. It can store at most 100 items. It also tells us that it has a serious bug, and that bug will happen even when the list still has lots of space left. The bug isn't due to us, I don't know, being able to fill the A list to having more than 100 items. That's not the bug. And the bug is also not an off by one error. So this question is going to be, let's look at this partial implementation and figure out what is wrong with it. So first, looking at question A says, what single line number could we change so that the bug is fixed? So in order to do this, we're just going to, I don't know, look through this and try and figure out where the bug is. Let's see. I mean, I think there are a couple ways that you can go about this. You can just start reading kind of line by line and really trying to think, oh, is this line exactly right? But it's hard to just stare at a big block of code and figure out exactly where the issue is. So I don't know, what you could do is look at some of the more complicated methods, look at each of the methods and the constructor and make sure that they're all doing what we expect them to do. So the constructor looks like it's correctly setting our items array and our size instance variable. It also looks like add last is going to correctly make sure that we are not going to go over basically how many items our AList max 100 can hold, and correctly says, okay, we're going to insert into our items array at index size. We're going to put in X, whatever we're trying to add, and then increment our size. Similarly, it looks like get last is doing the right thing. Checks to make sure that we aren't empty, and then returning the size minus 1th item, which is going to be the last item in the array list. So it looks like that's all looking good. And kind of by process of elimination, we should end up eventually looking up here at the instance variables. Maybe this is the first thing you look at, I don't know. And noticing, oh, wow, we have this static keyword here for the size of our AList max. So first of all, that looks out of place, right? Like in the past, we've never made our size instance variable static. But the real question is, fine, this is the bug, but why is it a bug? And what's the issue with it? And so if we think about like, okay, what happens when a variable is static? And we know what happens then is that instead of there being able to be like a different value for this variable for every instance of the class, there's only one value for this variable for like the class itself. And all instances will like share that value. And so I can write over here, we have this AList max 100 class. This is like the blueprint class. And underneath that, we'll write our static variable. So we know size is static here. And what happens, right, is when we create a new instance, we'll run the constructor and we'll like edit the instance variables as it tells us to. And so if we created a new instance, I'm writing here like, okay, pretend we're creating a new instance of AList max 100. We'd run the constructor. So this will have its own items. Amazing. I'm just gonna like that's length 100. It kind of trails off. I don't know, that's an array of length 100. And then what we do is we say, okay, size equals 0. But that's not like this instance's size variable. That's actually the static size variable. And so now you can kind of think about, okay, how can we get into trouble with this, right? Like if we add last on here, I don't know, we'll put 1 in there and increment size. Cool, that seems fine, right? Now if we get the size, there's 1 item in it. But the issue comes in like, oh, what if we make another one? So we've added something in there. Now we'll make another AList max 100. And we have to run the constructor, right? We create this items array and we set size to 0. And this is the static size. And so we're going to go up here and set this size to 0. So now if we think about, okay, what would happen if we wanted this AList max 100 size? If we called the method, we return size, and so we'd return 0. But we actually want to return 1 in this case. And this is just like one example of an issue we can get from this bug. There are lots and lots of other things we run into, right? Because every new AList instance, AList max 100 instance we create can change the static size variable. So now that we've discussed it, let's fill these questions in. A says, what single line number could we change so that the bug is fixed? And we can actually just get rid of the static keyword and the code will run fine. It's basically just like a simpler version of the AList that you implemented in project 1 or something. So we'll say line number 3. And describing the fix would be remove the static keyword. Amazing. And finally, we want to write this test. And we need to make the test fail because of the bug. And so we just kind of sketch that out a little bit. Like we're going to run into this bug when we create a new AList max 100. And that'll actually reset the size and we will run into all sorts of issues. And so the way to achieve this in a test is we'll like create one instance, we'll add a couple of things to it, then create another instance, and then test the size of our first one. And it, because of this static issue, won't behave as expected. And so what's it called? It's called a AList max 100. And let's call it, I don't know, we need to take in some, we need to give it the generic type. And so let's call this L, and we'll set that equal to new AList max 100. Great. So we'll create L, which is an AList max 100. And let's add a couple things to it. So we'll add last, I don't know, pick your favorite number, 5. And let's add again to it. We'll add last 10. Great, so now we have L, which has 2 elements in it, 5 and 10. And right now size is fine, right? Because we just have the 1 and we're incrementing the static size, but it's okay because we only have 1 instance that we're worried about. Now we're going to try and mess it up because we want this test to fail. And so we'll say AList max 100, again, of type, it's going to hold integers. We'll call it L2. Okay, and so this line in and of itself, actually, we're going to reset size to 0 here, but just kind of for good measure, let's also add something to L2. And finally, now we actually want to do the test. And so using our JUnit methods, we can assert equals, and we know that the issue is with size. So remember with our JUnit methods, we pass in the expected result here. And so we say, okay, what do we want as our first argument? And then like the thing that we're testing as our second argument. And so, right, we added 2 items, and so we should expect the size of L to be 2. But in this case, I believe with the static bug, it's actually going to return 1 because this creation of L2 goes ahead and messes it up. Okay, so this is an example of one of the tests you could have written. As long as it's failing because of the static issue, then that is a correct solution. So yeah, that is this question. Thank you all for watching. I hope you learned something. The answer to this is Spain, if you're wondering. And yeah, thanks and have a good day.